This is your reality check.
Welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. Today is January 24th, 2021. I'm producer Pat. Happy New Year. We have an interesting interview for you today with friend of the show, Dr. Stuart Farrimond. Longtime listeners will know Stu is a medical doctor turned science communicator and author. We've had him on about a variety of topics, and he's always a joy to talk to. His newest book was released last month, and it's great, so we mostly discuss different topics that Cristina and I picked out from the book. A bit of a story about this interview. In a perfect world, we ask that guests record their side of the conversation locally. That's how we normally record the show as a panel. Adam and Darren record together in Ottawa, and Cristina and I in Toronto, each of us recording locally while having the conversation over the internet, and then I try to stitch the two sides together. In this case, Stu was recording using a new microphone that he recently won, which has memory on board. I've never heard of such a thing, and so, since I'm interested in this sort of stuff, I had some questions. When I asked how much memory it had, Stu wasn't sure. And of course, since I asked about it, the remaining memory filled up after about 20 minutes and stopped recording. Luckily though, we use software that captures both sides of the conversation as a failsafe, all to say that you will notice a change in Stu's audio at about the 20-ish minute mark. The last thing I wanted to mention is that the crew is facing some short-term challenges recording shows for several reasons, not the least of which is new COVID restrictions in Quebec where Adam lives. We'll work through them, but our release schedule might be a little off for a bit, so your patience is really appreciated. And with that, I hope you enjoy our conversation with the awesome Dr. Stuart Farrimond. Welcome back to The Reality Check, Dr. Stuart Farrimond.
Thanks for having us.
Congrats on your new book. It's called The Science of Living in the UK and elsewhere, but here in North America, it's called Live Your Best Life. It's still a science communication book, of course, but in some ways it's a departure from your previous books. Maybe we can start with you telling us a bit about the book and particularly how it's organized.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be back on, by the way. Nice to speak to you guys again. The book is called The Science of Living, which is the kind of the name that I chose, but in North America, they decided to call it Live Your Best Life. So USA and Canada, it's Live Your Best Life, and over here and elsewhere, it's The Science of Living. So yeah, the book is how it's organised. The book is about looking at a particular a typical day in the life of a human on Earth. So it's kind of like quite a sort of a brave thing to do. The inspiration of the book, it's all about, can we answer those I wonder why questions that you get throughout the day? Because I don't know about you, but there's loads of stuff that you read online and magazines and newspapers that says things like, you need to sleep so many hours a night, or it's good to eat this thing, not good to eat this thing, you should shower at this time in the morning, you should have coffee at this time or whatever. All this sort of stuff that's out there about how you should live and what's the best thing to do. And you read them and it's all kind of really compelling stuff. But actually a lot of it is just pseudoscience and it's junk. So-and-so nutritionist in inverted commas says that you should do this, or some psychologist says that men use a different part of their brain to women for such and such a thing. And, as a person with a skeptical and a scientific, logical heart, I kind of like, actually, can we redress the balance here? Can we answer those questions in a scientific, evidence-based, authoritative, but still kind of fun and pithy and entertaining way? So that was the kind of the inspiration of the book, of doing all the things, that as many things as I could possibly imagine. So whenever I saw an article that said one of these things, so, you should brush your teeth before or after you have breakfast or something like that, I'd write it down and it'd go in the book. And there's so much stuff that we decided to break it down into morning, afternoon, evening and night. So you can kind of work through the day, and the questions as and when they arise, they would go in that order. So it's it's a nice kind of hook to sort of tie the whole book together.
Right.
The thing I really love about your book, it's almost like a reference book, right? You don't have to dedicate 4 to 5 hours to sit down and read through to get an idea of what you're getting at. You can just literally spend 10, 15 minutes and pick a couple of topics. When you started delving into the research for the book, is there a topic whose conclusion surprised you or that you found especially fascinating?
Yeah, well, one of the privileges of writing the book, was that I managed to get in touch with lots of different experts, professors and all people from around the world who are experts in a particular field, because I'm not an expert on on sleep, on exercise, on nutrition. I mean, I know a lot about all these different things, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert. And so to give an authoritative answer for each of these, I'd do my own research, and I would, look at the papers as, that you would find on Google Scholar, and read as much as I could. But ultimately, there were times when I needed to get an expert on it. And one of the things I found that was fascinating was that when I spoke to the sleep experts as to how utterly important and foundational to any kind of health sleep is, and there's not one physical or mental condition, illness, that is not benefited from improved sleep. Just one bad night's sleep and your body produces fewer cancer-fighting white blood cells. 1 week of bad sleep and there's already indicators that you're starting to develop the first signs of diabetes. And so it's not only that you don't think as well and think as clearly, but your whole body system. The reason why we sleep when we're injured or something is because it's the body's it's the best medicine that there is, and it's completely free, and it's sleep. And if we don't prioritize it, then everything else that we hope to achieve in life, we're basically on a hiding to nothing. So, one chap I was chatting to, Dr. Neil Stanley, who's a sort of a top sleep guy in this country, was making the point that you look at obesity and you look at poor quality sleep, and they have gone up, hand in hand. Although it's a correlation, that if you can't sleep as well, your ability to control your appetite is worse, and so you consume more calories. So there's a good school of thought that actually the obesity epidemic is contributed significantly by terrible sleep habits and people sleeping worse, and the quality of sleep going down. So that I just thought was staggering. And so in the book, we've I've kind of laid it all out of this is, and it's just staggering when you look at all those things together. So just about how you should prioritize sleep. So that is probably the most profound thing that I found in researching the book.
Speaking of experts that you talked to, I noticed that you spoke with friends of the show, Jim Davies and Kim Hellman.
Yes, yeah, well spotted. Yeah, they were absolutely. I was listening to them. Yes, yeah. How did I find them? It was off the back of you guys chatting with them, and I was listening to some of the stuff. Some of the stuff that they were doing, and it tapped into some of the psychological neuroscience sort of stuff where they nicely bridge between the neuroscience and the psychology of it all. So I sort of tapped them up on the stuff about smartphones and how we respond to smartphone and smartphone addictions and things. And yeah, they were very good for helping me with that. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Stuart, in the spirit of how the book is organized, maybe what we'd like to do is ask you a couple of questions from each section of the book. So first, back in December, we had a question from you for a checker to win a copy of the book. It was won by Lisa Marie, who lives in the East Coast here in Canada. And your question was, if you wake up at 7 a.m., when is the best time to have your first cup of coffee to get the maximum effect of the caffeine? So what's the answer and why?
This is quite a popular one. What's the best time to drink a cup of coffee? And everybody's got their opinion on it. Everybody's got their opinion on, how you would make your own mac and cheese, how you make your cup of tea, how you have your coffee. And this in particular is a hot topic. But if you look at the science, then to have a coffee very first thing in the morning when you first wake up, it's not a good idea. And the reason for that is that the caffeine works by blocking a brain hormone, a neurotransmitter, if you like, that's called adenosine. And this is the substance that actually makes you feel sleepy. And as the day goes on, adenosine slowly builds up throughout the day. So the evening time, adenosine is at its highest. And so you get sleepy and you want to go to bed. So in the morning, adenosine is at its lowest. So if you have a coffee then, you're blocking this hormone, which is at its lowest, this neurotransmitter, adenosine, when it's at its lowest. So actually, it's the worst time to drink the coffee. And on top of that, when you first wake up, you've got the highest levels just after you wake up, you get a surge of the stress hormone, cortisol, and this hormone is what gives you energy. It's what gives you get up and go. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning. So you've got this really high cortisol, and you've got this rock bottom adenosine, and so you have the coffee on top of that, and essentially you're blocking the tiny amount of adenosine, and it's not doing very much. You're throwing basically a couple of matches onto a raging bonfire. So ideally, if you just wait, and by doing that, you're increasing your chances of getting jittery, of getting anxious, and starting off the day on the wrong foot, so to speak. So that's what the science would say. And so ideally, if you wait an hour or so, maybe 2 to 3 hours, until adenosine has creeped up a little bit and the cortisol has dropped off, then you're going to get a much better effect from the caffeine. That said, some people will shout to the blue in the face that they've got to have their espresso first thing in the morning because they can't function. And I think one thing I talk about in the book is that everybody's got their own body clock. Everybody's body clock is got a different sort of, it's different. Everybody's is adjusted a little bit different. And so some people will respond to caffeine in a different way. Some people will naturally wake up earlier. And so there's lots of different factors. But generally speaking, that's what the science would say, is that you're better off just waiting a little bit. So in the book, I say 2 to 3 hours. So that would be, say, between 10 and 11 o'clock would be a great time to have a coffee. You don't want to push it back too late, because after about 12 o'clock, then there's a danger that a strong coffee could still be lingering in the evening time. So so I thought something about 9 or 10 o'clock is probably a good answer. What did we get?
She said 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, brilliant. Yes.
And she said quite honestly that it was simply a guess, because that's around the time she has her first cup of coffee.
Yeah, well, she's doing well. Good. That's fantastic. So yes, well done, Lisa Marie. That's yes, congratulations.
I'm going to experiment with this next week. As Pat knows, I have a couple of cups of coffee in the morning, and the first one is more of a ritual. So I'm thinking that if I really need one, I'll just have a decaf, and then I'll have my caffeine mid-morning. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. I'll report back.
Thank you. Well, there's some research that suggests actually first thing in the morning, the smell of coffee has an invigorating effect, similar to actually drinking it. So whether that is something itself or it is just the placebo thing. I mean, I know my wife, she wouldn't even talk to me until she's had a coffee first thing in the morning. So there's no way I'm going to convince her.
Stuart, you were talking about how you were fascinated by learning more about sleep. When Darren covered it on our show, he did a book by Matthew Walker, who's also a leading guy, and his book was called Why We Sleep. And I was surprised, at how much I learned, to your point about how much sleep affects everything in our life. And I'm lucky. I naturally wake up when the daylight hits the window. I don't need an alarm to wake up. The only time I need an alarm is when I have to get up as part of my job to oversee early morning television show appearances by artists I work with. And I'm going to be straight up with you, Stuart. I purposely set my alarm about 20 minutes before I have to get out of bed, and I hit the snooze button twice. So should I be hitting that snooze button at all?
Well, again, everybody's different, and everybody will have their own routine and their own ritual. And if I say you must or you mustn't do something, I'm going to get into a lot of trouble. But hitting the snooze button is generally not a good idea, because alarms wake you up in the morning because they're loud and they're harsh, and it taps and essentially giving a bit of terror in the morning to get us out of bed. We've evolved to wake up quickly to loud noises because it means we're in danger, we're under threat. There could be something that's about to harm us. When we're woken up by this loud noise, which is an alarm from your phone or whatever, it's the same sort of primal response. You get a surge of adrenaline, you get the fight or flight response. Your emotions, you're on tender hooks, and so that's happening inside of you. So if you're waking up to an alarm, that's, for one thing, that's not ideal, because you've already got the natural cortisol that's there to get you going in the morning. If you add, the fight or flight, the body's emergency responses on top of that, then actually you're going to be making yourself more anxious. And there's research to show that if you repeatedly have stressful wakenings over many years, then it increases the rate at which your arteries will fur up, a process called atherosclerosis, which is basically the furring up of the arteries and poor heart health by having years of very stressful wakening. So hitting the snooze button means that you drop back off again, and then you suffer the same insult again. And that's that 10 or 15 minutes. And essentially that isn't enough time for you to get any restful sleep. You can't get into the deep, restful stages of sleep in that time. So essentially you're letting yourself drift off again, and then you're shocking yourself back awake again. So it's actually sort of quite a self-defeating thing.
I've always thought that waking up to an alarm was a pretty atrocious thing to have to go through. So why would anyone want to go through it 3 or 4 times?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if it's an emergency, you've got to get out there. I guess you've just got to set an alarm, loud alarms. I think it's better to. What I try to do is I will set an alarm as a fail-safe. So I'll try and have my day organised, or go to bed at a time so that I wake up with plenty of time for what I've got to do, and it's easier in sort of lockdown world because we've got more control over our schedule. But set the alarm as a fail-safe. So if you do sleep in for whatever reason, then you're not going to miss your appointment or whatever it is. But there are other tips that you can use to avoid having to use the alarm. And it's really interesting, Cristina, that you say about you wake up when the sun hits your window, and that's because our body clock, which is controlled by this tiny little bundle of nerves, which is at the bottom of our brain and sort of in line with our eyes. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's a tiny pinhead-sized little bit of the brain that is basically the orchestrator of your overall body clock, which tells you when you wake, when you sleep, your energy levels, and that receives inputs from the back of the eye. And in the back of the eye, there are cells designed just to pick up a particular frequency of light that kind of comes. It's a blue frequency of light that you get from sunlight, and so when your eyes are closed, it's still kind of detecting the light through your closed eyelids, and so as the sun rises in the morning, it's detecting that change in ambient light, and then it primes your body clock for now is the time to wake up. So that's why that's happening. So you can trick that by getting some lamps in your room, and you can get particular daylight lamps that emit light frequencies similar to that from the sun and from the outside, and you can get a plug, and you can time it so that it will come on half an hour before your alarm would come on, and that will help. So you'll probably wake up naturally. Failing that, if you put your central heating on half an hour before you're due to wake up, that temperature as well as light will tell the body clock it's dawn now, it's daytime. It's sort of replicating the warming of the earth from the sun rising. So if you do that, that's a very good way to get yourself out of bed in the morning. Set the thermostat to come on at the time that you need to get out of bed.
So, Stuart, you mentioned anxiety, and that's a thing that hits home for me. And you have a couple of sections in your book that I wanted to ask you about. Is there a quick way for me to calm my nerves, and how can I manage worrying thoughts?
Now, I guess this was one of the other things that kind of came out of the book. So one of the things was that it dawns on you that you have less control over what your body does than what you think. So our body clock actually is calling the shots on a lot of things in our life. But conversely, we have a lot more control over our emotions and our thought life than we actually think that we do. So I kind of make the point in the book is that emotions aren't these, isn't like weather that rolls in from the sea and we have no control over. Actually, emotions and worries and these things are actually birthed within us. And a lot of it comes from sensations within our body itself. So you've probably heard of experiments where they've injected students with adrenaline, and then they've asked them to look at something, an image or a film or something, and then they've asked them how angry do you feel, or what emotion would you describe? And when they've had the adrenaline and they've set that fight or flight response, they say that they feel angry, much more angrier than those who haven't. And that's a really crude demonstration of how our body interprets our our brain interprets what our body is doing to into emotions and our sort of our thought life, if you like. And you can sort of not sabotage it, but you can manipulate what your body is doing to help calm yourself down. So your body will sense the tension in your muscles, the rate of your heart, your blood pressure, the sort of the internal state of your organs. There's like an inward looking eye. There's a part your brain is constantly surveying the internal state of your body. It's called interoception. You can think of it like it's another sense that we never talk about. And from this vague idea of your internal state, it sort of creates: am I feeling pleasant? Am I feeling unpleasant? Am I feeling stimulated? Am I feeling relaxed? And from those four kind of hues of your internal state, your mind will then overlay that of what is going on around me, and it will sort of convert that into an emotional what we would call an emotion. So, anger, fear, the whole kind of plethora of the spectrum of emotions is created out of the germinated from what's happening in our body. So you can't control your heart rate, you can't control your blood pressure, but you control your breathing. And so by controlling your breathing, by breathing more slowly, so breathe in for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, then that's a signal to your brain that actually there is an emergency. My body is not under threat. I don't need to get anxious about this. That's so you can send your brain those messages, and that's one way to do it. The other thing to do is to practice calming thoughts. So you can, when you're in a calm, let's say, for example, you get really anxious at public speaking, or there's something that you're going to be worried about. You can rehearse being calm, deep breathing, letting your muscles relax, just being in a very calm state, positive thoughts, saying something about, I really love myself, I can do this, whatever it is that works for you. And you can rehearse that before the time. And one thing that some sort of counselors and psychologists suggest is some kind of almost a little ritual, like a tapping or something, like a tapping on your wrist or something. So you're rehearsing this.
Interesting.
You're rehearsing this thought process, this calm state, the opposite of the fight or flight. This what we would call a parasympathetic bodily response. And by linking that in with a behavior, say a tapping or a clicking or something like that, then when you get into that tense situation, you're going to go up on stage, you're going to take the exam, you've got the driving lesson or whatever it is, you can just take a moment, you can do that little rehearsed routine, and then you can put yourself into that state of mind. In terms of quick way to managing your nerves and managing your worrying thoughts, there you go.
One thing that resonated with me, and this is why I chose it to talk to you about, is the part that talks about your gut instinct. I'm a firm believer in trusting my gut. And one thing that really bugs me about saying you trust your gut, though, is that some people think it's some sort of mystical sixth sense thing, where I just believe it's my brain processing a bunch of stuff that's happened to me in the past, or that I've learned, and it's spitting out a warning beacon. So after reading this part of your book, I realized it's not so simple. So perhaps you could get into that for me, Stuart.
Yeah, sure. It's it's neither one nor the other, really. So there is quite a lot of mythology and sort of pseudoscience about gut instincts, and you see it all the time. You've got sort of CEOs and all this, and we have a program over here called Dragon's Den. I think it's called Shark's Den over there. And you've got you've got these high flyers and say, always trust my gut instinct. It's how I've been so successful all my life. And you go, really? The skeptical side of you says, are you serious? You knew how to do that based on your gut. But there's been actually quite a lot of research into the gut instinct, what's going on. And what you're describing an emotional memory. These are memories that have been embedded through experience, through powerful emotional experiences that are being conjured up. And yet you may not be able to recall the actual specific.
but you've got a sort of a sense of something, and there may be something in the environment, something in that situation that invokes this emotional feeling, this emotional memory. So what you're describing is an emotional memory, but typically it's not really easily hooked onto something. You're not sure where it's come from, but these emotional memories, these gut instincts can be very powerful, but only in limited situations. So, there's some fantastic stories of firefighters who didn't know what was going wrong, and they had this gut instinct that the house was going to fall down from a fire, and they didn't know why, and they ordered everybody out of the house. And then moments later, the house kind of exploded, and little did they know what it was that he sensed, and it was because he was in the room and the floor was hot, and that would be very unusual in the situation of the house fire. And yet he wouldn't have been able to say, we'd have got it out of here, the floor is warm, that means that there's a fire underneath us that we don't know about. He just felt that it wasn't right, and that triggered these emotional memories. It just causes an unsettling in him. So, and that made him go, this isn't right. It stirred that fear response in him. And without being able to describe what it was that caused it, his gut was to say, let's get out of here. This isn't right. And so in those situations, we can rely on our emotions, but they're only in situations that are very specific situations. And these are situations that have clear boundaries and clear limits to it, by which I mean a game of chess, for example. There's only a limited number of outcomes that can happen. Yes, there's infinite number of games you can play, but there are limits. Flying a plane, you're a pilot, let's say, for example, that is a limited situation. So these are situations that are predictable, they're repeatable, that actually your gut, you can trust your gut instinct on these, providing you've had enough experience. So you've had years of experience as a pilot, years of experience as even as a computer hacker, for example, something like that, as a pilot, as a firefighter, in these specific situations. You can rely on your gut for that. But for situations that are broader than that, and for which that isn't predictable, so the stock market, for example, isn't predictable at all, and yet people think they can rely on their gut instincts, and they can't. You can't do it. And often sort of business situations, you can be an expert at one particular field of industry. I don't know, maybe it is sort of clothes retail or something. And then you can be hired to go to another industry, I don't know, like real estate or something. And people can think, oh, this person's going to be fantastic. And they say, oh, I'm a great business leader. I trust my gut instincts. I make all these great decisions. But their gut instincts were honed in the fires of their retail, and not in this new situation for which the rules of which they've learnt don't apply. So, I mean, in the book I put in, it's sort of like a flowchart I put in there. Is the situation predictable?
Yes, that graphic is great, Stuart.
That graphic.
Yeah.
If it's not, then don't trust your gut instinct. If it is, then ask yourself, do I have the experience to be able to trust my gut instinct? And if not, then you go and find somebody with more experience than you. And then also the question, do I have enough information of what's going on here? And if not, then you need to go and find out more information, more background to it. And if you can answer yes to all those things, then yes, you can trust your gut instincts. Outside of that, be careful.
Okay, Stuart. So Pat's handing the reins over to me for the evening portion, because you have a couple of things. Well, you have lots of stuff in it that is fascinating to me. But in particular, this is something that I think about and struggle and have tried to research and haven't really gotten a really good sense of what the science is. And that is what and when should I eat before exercise, and when should I eat after? And in fact, a lot of fitness-related stuff, even though this is one of the most covered topics, it really doesn't have the scientific rigor behind it. So I struggle with this, the best time to work out around meals. So I'm hoping you can Help me out.
Yeah, exercise. Nutrition. Put the two together, nutrition and exercise together. It's sort of, you want to look for pseudoscience. You want to look for, faulty thinking. Then you just search online, and it's very hard. It's very hard, and I think you just got to look at it very simply in terms of eating before exercise. Essentially, if you're going to do any significant exercise, you want to have fuel on board, and so you should eat before you exercise any kind of serious exercise. You wouldn't go on a long car drive without putting fuel in the tank. So in the same way, you should eat beforehand, taking account of the fact that it takes time for food to be digested and for its nutrients to be extracted, for them to be assimilated into your body. So a good sort of rule of thumb is have a meal, a sort of a proper full meal, no sooner than 3 hours before you exercise, because it takes that long for your body to digest and process a whole meal. And any later than that, and then the problem is that you're still digesting the food. There's still food sitting in your stomach and in your intestines that your body's working at digesting, and that isn't conducive to good performance.
That is longer than I thought when I read
it. It is. It's surprising, isn't it? Yeah, it is surprising. Yeah. So you kind of, absolutely. So absolutely. So when people say, "Oh, I had a steak just before I went and had my football game and I played the best game ever," then actually the steak probably didn't do it, because the steak was still only partially digested, sitting in your intestines. So
right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's surprising. And then up to 2 hours before, you could have like a small meal, or a large-ish snack, and then up to an hour before, small snacks, and then within the hour before you start the exercise, just go for small things, because easy digestible things. I mean, so you've got kind of like, you can have energy bars, and sweets or pieces of fruit or something like that. Or I recommend up to like an hour before, maybe some yogurt or something like that. Yogurt, because I tend to think it's better to go with sort of more whole foods, unprocessed foods, rather than I know if you're a real sort of super athlete and you focus on performance, then having the sort of the glucose gels or whatever it is can help give you that fuel at the time. So fueling before is important. If you're going to do long endurance exercise, then possibly 45 minutes to an hour into the exercise, depending, or maybe 90 minutes, depending on the intensity of your exercise. At that point, the sugar stores called glycogen, which is the longer term sugar stores, which are stored in your muscle and in your liver, they will have pretty much started to get down to the bottom of their tanks. And so before then, you need to start topping up your glycogen. Glycogen is another word, is animal starch. So it's starch that your body keeps on board. And before those tanks run too low, you need to keep topping up. So maybe 45 minutes, an hour into your long run or something, have something like some sweets, a piece of chocolate or an energy, something gel or something like that, as you go, to keep yourself topped up. Because if those fuel tanks run completely dry, then basically you hit the wall. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase, or cyclists call it bonking.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, the cyclists call it, and essentially you've run out of there's no fuel left in the tank. Your legs will go shaky. You may well pass out. You might, be sick, might vomit, but that's hitting the wall. It's very, very unpleasant, and potentially it's very dangerous. So you want to avoid that at all costs, because if you get to that point, then you've just got to stop. No matter how hard you try and push, there's nothing left. So you need to make sure that you don't hit that point. So that's why eating before is really important, so you never get near that point. In terms of eating, now again, this whole kind of exercise and nutrition thing is still very confusing. For many of the questions that you're asking, I got in touch with I've had a professor who's kind of top in all sort of sports nutrition and physiology and stuff at a local university, and spent a good time chatting with him. And he explained that there's different. You can, if you want to really, be all that you can be. So sort of athletes, what they can do is they do this. They do a regime of cutting the amount of carbohydrates that you eat in the week or two before, whilst continuing to train as you would do normally. And what you're doing is you're training yourself to work to basically training your muscles to be able to cope with running essentially on empty. So it'll be very uncomfortable for the week for a couple of weeks before. Don't trust me on the timings, just off the top of my head. But in the book, he explained to me, and I just put it down. And it's something that, if you're really serious, you can consider probably best doing it under sort of personal trainer advice. And then a day or two before, you start to do that whole carb loading thing. So you start pulling the carbohydrates back in, such as your starches, your breads, your potatoes. Then essentially, because you've starved your fuel tanks, your glycogen fuel tanks, which in your muscles and in your liver, they're just desperate for starches to come into the body, for sugars to be eaten, so that they can convert it into your body's animal starches, your body's glycogen. And so it's desperate. So when you eat at that point of having starved yourself, you actually superload your stores with more glycogen than would normally be possible. And so when you actually exercise, you'll actually be able to go for longer and be able to be a bit stronger than you would be otherwise. It's quite a lot of palaver, but that's the sort of the science behind how you can game your body, how you can game the system, so that you could get that a little bit more out of your performance.
Mm-hmm. I've read a lot of differing information about when you should eat after, specifically, even more so than what and when you should eat before exercise.
Yeah, afterwards. And so the big thing is protein, and people are always talking about protein. And the whole thing, you've got to have your protein within half an hour after finishing your workout and all this stuff. And all things being equal, in reality, you've got about a 6-hour window after exercise when your muscles are very receptive to what you feed them. So at that time, in the 6 hours afterwards, that's when you really want to be sort of having a decent meal. In terms of straight afterwards, it doesn't really matter. And actually, because generally speaking, most protein foods take about 90 minutes to be digested and absorbed into the bloodstream anyway. I mean, there may be some sort of highly refined protein shakes and things that are absorbed a bit faster, but the message is that it takes time for the protein to get into your body. So fretting about whether it's been 20 or 30 minutes after exercise or you're having the shake or not, basically don't worry, chill out about it. There is more time sensitive if you want to refresh your muscles with the glycogen again after exercise. And for that, if you wanted to top those stores back up again, then you want to really do it in the hour or two after. So have good carbs, if you like, after exercise. That said, that's only really needed if you're going to exercise later in the day. Because if you're not going to exercise later in the day, then you'll just be top. It doesn't matter. Eat in the evening, and your fuel supplies will be top. So if you're doing a lot of exercise, let's say you've got a sports match in the morning, and then you've got one in the afternoon. Then when you've depleted all your fuel reserves in the morning, make sure you eat well for the afternoon. But if you just got one run in a day, don't worry about it, because your body will refresh itself later in the evening.
So, Stuart, I want to ask one other question from the evening thing before we move into night. And you asked, is hugging good? And in the context of COVID, that seems like a really good question, because we can't do very much of it.
No, I know. I think we're all missing physical touch. Yeah. Hugging, yes, very important for health. Absolutely. Yeah. And a good correlation, especially with children, with the amount of physical touch they get and brain development. But yeah, when we hug another person, the physical contact, the touching, stimulates a release of a brain hormone called oxytocin, a neurotransmitter called oxytocin. It's also called the cuddle hormone. And this essentially powers down the thinking, rational parts of our brain and heightens the emotional and empathetic parts of our brain. And it helps us bond, helps us have affection for each other. It creates bonding, and and a similar thing happens with children and their parents. Is that touch is important. It also improves mood, and your whole sort of internal body chemistry is improved through physical touch. So, for example, your blood pressure is lowered. On a more global sort of scale, then actually people who hug more will tend to be happier. They'll tend to be healthier. So yes, hugging is really important, and it's important for physical health and physical well-being. Interestingly, you can get the same benefits, some similar benefits from hugging with petting animals. It's not as big, but you can get a similar. There are definite benefits from pets, and if your pet is a pet that you can hug, then absolutely. Although hugging strangers has the reverse effect. Sometimes people say, I'm going to go and hug strangers. I'm going to make people happy. But generally speaking, when you when you look at it, actually, if you're not comfortable with that person, then it causes the opposite. It causes your adrenaline to go up. It causes your cortisol to go up, because this is something I don't feel comfortable with. So don't go up into the street and hug somebody randomly because you think it's going to make them happier, because actually it has the reverse effect. So hugging is, because essentially every animal in the animal kingdom, maybe I wouldn't be absolutely every animal, but pretty much physical embrace is pretty universal in the animal kingdom. It's about showing safety, security. It's done between parents and their children. It's done between siblings. It's a universal sort of safety sort of signal, and it triggers those calming, those safe, those relaxed brain circuits in us, and the whole physiology in a healthier state. So hugging, physical touch, crucially important. And so I think everybody's going to be a lot happier when we can start holding hands and hugging again.
I know there's a couple of friends in our circle that we joke that they're just such good huggers. We just love giving them hugs. And when I was thinking about it after reading your book, and you mentioned it, a good 20 seconds before these are people that really give you a hug. They hold you. And it's obviously people I feel comfortable around. But I wonder if that has something to do with it, that I feel like they're a better hugger because they're hugging me longer. So I'm getting that effect in my brain.
Yeah, I did mention that. There is some research to show that a longer hug, so 20 seconds, gives a more of a beneficial boost. And I think that is largely about that. If you're going to have a 20-second hug, then that indicates a certain degree of trust and intimacy with that person.
Right. Yeah.
That you're not going to do that with a stranger. So and it does. And if you've ever just hugged somebody for a long time, provided it's not uncomfortable and you have a degree of affection to that person, it's a really reassuring, calming thing to do. It's a lovely thing. So yeah, absolutely, yes. And the other thing is you're sharing pheromones. So pheromones are these
Are these awesome doctors that write books that come on your show? Is that what you're going to say?
Well, pheromones. Pheromones are these they're substances, they're kind of chemicals that transmit information between animals, and we believe that there are pheromones between humans that communicate things. So a dog will know when another dog is on heat from the pheromones that they're giving off, these things that are there that can be sensed. And there's a little organ inside our nose, inside the wall of our nasal cavity, that detects these pheromones. And it's a little bit difficult with humans because we've never been able to nail one chemical specifically that is a pheromone, but we kind of know that they exist. So there's one fascinating study where they got women to cry watching emotional movies. Had got to cry, and they caught their tears in little kind of test tube receptacles, and then they got men to sniff the tears at a later point and measured their emotional response to it. And you found out that when a man was smelling the tears, so by implication the pheromones from that woman who'd been upset and distressed. He had a lowering of testosterone and an increase of empathy and presumably an increase of oxytocin in him. So it's that affection. Yeah, so actually you can be communicating your emotional state through pheromones that you're unaware of. So that fact of holding embrace is quite possibly a way in which we're enabling that unseen, transference of emotions and feelings.
Okay, so I guess it's time to get into the night section of your book. And I have a question that Pat looked at me and said, why are you asking that? Where no one's flying anywhere right now. But my son and I had planned to fly to Paris. We had a really nice vacation planned around the week of Mother's Day. So I was already doing some research into how to jet lag because we were booked on a late night flight, which I like to do if I'm going abroad like that. And the last time I flew to Paris, I arrived in the morning. I stayed up until nighttime, which seemed to help a little bit. But I wanted to know from you, in the spirit of optimism, flying again, what is the best way to deal with jet lag?
The best way to deal with jet lag is to prepare yourself beforehand and have a plan for what you're going to do. And I just find it weird that jet lag didn't exist before we had air flight. I just think that's really strange, isn't it? You kind of think jet lag is such a thing that we're so familiar with, but before we had planes, we didn't get it because, you couldn't move somewhere fast enough to make your body clock go out of sync with the sun. Because that's essentially what's happening is your body clock hasn't yet entrained itself to the new cycle of the day. So you think it's much harder going east than it is going west. So for you going to Paris is much harder than for you going to Australia, for example. So I would find it easier to fly to New York than it would be for me to fly to Sydney. I'm in the UK, obviously, for people who weren't immediately aware of that. And that is because if you're going east, then actually the day you're getting towards the end of the day faster, and it's more difficult to make yourself go to sleep before you're tired than it is going the other way to make yourself stay up for longer.
Interesting.
So yes, if you go, that's why going one way is easier than the other way. But in terms of being able to combat it, I mean, for one thing, it's just grim. There's no way around, really. You can't shift your body clock more than about an hour a day, one way or the other. So you've got to bear in mind that you just got to give yourself time to do it. So if you move sort of 4 hours, then you're not going to be properly over it for 4 days, unfortunately. But there's things that you can do to accelerate that. So when you get into the plane, start having your meals in the same time that you would be having in your destination, because as well as sunlight and temperature, your meals also tell your body clock what time of day it is. So if you do that from the off, then already you're telling your body, okay, this is evening meal time. This is breakfast time. So in doing that, the other thing is avoid alcohol and caffeine on board.
I don't like that one, Stuart. I don't like that one.
No, I'm sorry. But in terms of sleep, then yes, avoid them, because that will just screw up your whole ability to sleep sensibly. So avoid those. And when you get there, if it's in the evening time when you get there, put some sunglasses on and try to stay out of the sunlight to train your mind to actually, this is evening time. So especially if you're going east, for example, and you're going to find it very hard to go to bed early, then put some shades on in the evening time, and in the morning get out, get loads of sunlight in the morning as soon as you can. As soon as you get there, eat at the regular times, have breakfast when you should have breakfast, have the evening meal, and so try to amplify as much as you can the natural signals to your body clock. So get as much light in the morning, put shades on in the afternoons. So you're telling the suprachiasmatic nucleus, that little sort of bundle of cells that is the orchestrator of your body clock, that's picking up the signals of light, that, this is morning, this is really bright, this is evening, this is dark. And that can help speed up your transition from one time zone into another.
So there's no way to beat jet lag. It's just kind of, you can fool your body into making it a little bit better. And
that's right. Yeah. You just got to take time for it to slide. There's no way to beat it. You can do those things to help speed it, but you just got to be kind of kind with yourself. You can't. Yeah.
So, Stuart, in the book, I found a new name for something I often suffer from, and you call it sleep jerks.
Yes.
What is it, and why do I get them?
Or they're also called hypnagogic jerks or hypnic jerks. Okay. Yes, they're hypnagogic jerks or sleep jerks. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? You're going to bed, you're nodding off, then all of a sudden you sort of jolt awake. It's like you've been hit by lightning or something, or that you often have this sensation of falling. Like, do you get that?
I've had that, but
really
Pat
weird,
gets
isn't
it more than me.
So for me, it's a frightening experience.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah.
Why we get them, we're not entirely sure. One theory. So what's going on in the brain when you're falling asleep? There's two parts of your brain that are warring against one another when you're going to sleep. One is called the reticular activating system. That's a structure in the base of the brain, like a network of fibers. And this is the thing that makes you awake. It makes you conscious. So that's constantly ticking away, making you stay awake. And against that, you've got another part of the brain, which is sort of the part of the brain that's sending you to sleep, called the VPLO, and that's sending out sleep-inducing neurotransmitters. And you can kind of think of it, there's a war going on between the two. And ultimately, because you've got adenosine, that sleep hormone, sleepy hormone, flooding around your brain, you're going to fall asleep. But every now and then, the other part of it, the reticular activating system, lands a blow, if you like. Then all of a sudden, it shocks your. If you can imagine, I kind of analogize it to being like a wrestling match between two, and then eventually the sleepy one is going to win. But occasionally, the drive to wake up will sort of break through, and you'll have this jump awake. That's what's going on in the brain. The theory, the one idea, evolutionary theory behind it is that it kind of developed an evolved response from when we were living in trees. And as a response to, if our muscles are relaxing too much, then it jolts us awake as if we're going to fall out of the tree. And hence it accompanies that sense of falling. It's almost the fear of, oh my gosh, am I falling out of my tree? I better jolt myself up awake. That's a theory. I mean, it's completely unproven, but I like it. It's kind of quite nice. It's nice to think that perhaps this is just my survival instinct, so I don't fall out of my tree.
It is pretty scary because you literally feel like you were falling, and all of a sudden you're just like, ah! So it's not a fun thing to go through.
No.
So, Stuart, we could not let you go without asking you a food question. And this question comes from Space Stew, Dr. Stuart Robbins, the astronomer. He wrote in and said, something that might make a good question to answer the next time you have Stuart, meaning you, on. Why does freezing break homogenization in dairy? He goes on to say, so early in the quarantine, he stocked up on heavy cream and just figured he'd freeze it and take it out when he wanted to make ice cream. But he found after about a month or so in the deep freeze, when he took it out, it was completely separated. No amount of shaking really homogenized it again. Even though at a distance it looked better, there were still small globs of fat that were cohesive within the solution. He says his hypothesis was that somehow the freezing process, quote unquote, broke the homogenization, but I've never heard of that and couldn't think of a great reason why. So maybe you can let Space Stew know what's going on here?
Yeah, he's completely on the right track. Yes, he's right. So the freezing is breaking the homogenization. I mean, it's not a term I've ever used before, but homogenization is essentially breaking down big blobs of fat into small ones. So in milk, you've got these little sort of sort of organized blobs of fat that are floating around, and given time you let milk rest and they will aggregate together, and so cream rises to the top. So to prevent that, what milk producers do, they put them through a homogenizer, and that's basically squirting milk through a very fine hose, and you're basically blasting apart all the little globules of fat into tiny little globules of fat. So you're dispersing them so they're much smaller. So you freeze it, and essentially you're laying all that hard work that you put in breaking up those little blobs of fat into microscopic blobs of fat. The water freezes to ice. The fat is left on its own, and the fat sticks back together again. So all those little blobs have now become big blobs again. And so then when you then defrost it, when you thaw it, then it's you're not going to. It's just the cream's going to be sort of randomly separated amongst it. And you can stir it, and unless you put it through in a homogenizer machine again, then you're not going to get it back to how it was. It'll probably taste fine, but it won't look the same. So it's absolutely right. Yeah. Interestingly, that I was looking this up and I was Googling. I was like, is there a good picture for this to sort of, am I right about this? And I Googled and I wrote an answer to this question in 2010 on my blog. Believe it or not.
Cool.
I Googled it and I saw I answered this question in 2010. Isn't that strange?
You Googled yourself.
I Googled myself. I Googled it and I found my own answers. I forgot actually writing this.
I wonder if a smart bloke ever answered this online before. Let me take a goog.
Yeah, I was just like, because I don't do my blog very often anymore, and so most of it is really out of date. And I just sort of like, oh right, I've done this already. So yeah.
Well, maybe you need a Live Your Best Life podcast. I don't know, just dropping it there.
It's true. The guy who I did the audiobook with, I mean, he loved it all. And he said, I really love listening to it in the car. And because I find that if you were to, the book is a very sort of bite-sized thing. Just you wouldn't read it all in one go. And the same thing, you wouldn't listen to the audiobook in one go, because you listen to about 3 or 4 and then you're like, oh, brain can't take any more in. But he said, individual ones, there's 219 answers in there. There's 219 pre-made podcast episodes. So we're considering it.
Oh, cool.
To actually consider it. Yeah, and it could be really interesting to, have, as I was talking about, different experts that I've had on, to actually have them in, to sort of have interviews with them, and so we can talk around an individual point and discuss the latest research and stuff.
I would subscribe to that, Stuart. I would subscribe to that.
We covered 8 things that are in your book, and this is going to be the most epic lengthwise TRC that's come out in years. So
I don't know if you want to put it all in one, because it's going to be a bit of a mammoth one, isn't it?
No, it's all going out in one. I'm not big about breaking up interviews anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Stuart, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We're sending you an over 20-second virtual hug.
Nice one. I appreciate that embrace, and I reciprocate it back to you.
All right.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
It's called. Sorry, start again. Sorry.
You forgot what your book was called.
That's
an outtake.
That's an outtake for you.